She was hailed as the season's pristine diamond, the perfect mother for his motherless twins. Yet Sebastian Stirling, the Duke of Harrogate, suspected that diamonds are cold and appearances are often fatal lies. Rather than entering his estate as a lord, he crawled through its walls, watching from the dark shadows. He sought a loving stepmother, but witnessed a nightmare that shattered his world. He never expected to find her, the invisible maid risking everything to save his bloodline. This is no fairy tale. It is the brutal, shocking truth found hidden behind the closed doors of the British aristocracy. October 14th, 1889. Derbyshire, England. The fog clinging to the moors of Derbyshire was thick enough to choke a man, but for Sebastian Stirling, it was the perfect cover. The carriage had dropped him 3 miles from the main gate of Harrogate Manor. He didn't want the fanfare. He didn't want the line of servants bowing in the rain. He wanted the truth. Sebastian was a man carved from grief and granite. 2 years ago, his wife, Lydia, had passed in childbirth, leaving him with William and Charlotte, twins who possessed her eyes, but his stubbornness. For 2 years he had buried himself in his work in Parliament, leaving the children in the care of nannies, and, recently, his fiancée, Lady Genevieve Caldwell. Genevieve was perfection on paper. The daughter of an earl, impeccable lineage, and a smile that charmed Queen Victoria herself. In his letters, she wrote of the twins with overflowing affection. "My little angels," she called them. "They are the light of my days." So why did William's letters, written in a shaky, tear-stained hand, consist of only 3 words? "Father, come home." Sebastian adjusted the collar of his rough woolen coat. He was not dressed as a duke today. He wore the attire of a common groundskeeper, a disguise he had used during his military days for reconnaissance. He slipped through the rusted iron of the servants' entrance at the back of the estate, a key he hadn't used in a decade, cold in his palm. He didn't go to the master suite. He went to the Vanes. Harrogate Manor was built in the 16th century, riddled with priest holes and servant passages designed to move unseen between rooms. Sebastian knew them better than anyone. He and his brother had played in them as boys. The air inside the walls was stale, smelling of dry rot and centuries-old dust. He moved silently, his boots wrapped in cloth to dampen the sound. He climbed the narrow, spiraling service stairwell that led to the east wing, the nursery and the children's quarters. He reached the viewing grate that looked into the children's playroom. It was covered by a tapestry on the other side, but the fabric was thin enough to see through if the light was right. He waited. The room was grand, filled with imported rocking horses and porcelain dolls that looked too expensive to touch. The fire was roaring. The door opened. Sebastian's breath hitched. Lady Genevieve walked in. She was breathtaking in a gown of emerald silk, her bustle perfectly fashionable, her hair piled high. She looked every inch the duchess she was soon to be. "William! Charlotte!" Her voice was melodic, sweet like treacle. The twins, 5 years old, scrambled out from behind a sofa. They didn't run to her. They stood rigid, hands clasped behind their backs, eyes fixed on the floor. "We are here, Lady Genevieve," William murmured. "Look at you," she sighed, walking over to inspect them. She reached out, and Sebastian watched William flinch, a microscopic movement, but to a father's eye it was a scream. She smoothed William's hair, her grip tightening visibly on his shoulder. "Your father returns in 3 days. Do you remember the rules?" "Yes, my lady," they chorused, voices hollow. "Repeat them." Her voice dropped an octave. The sweetness curdled. "We are to be seen and not heard," Charlotte whispered, trembling. "We are to tell father we love our new mother. We are to say the bruises came from falling from the apple tree." Sebastian felt his blood turn to ice. "Bruises? Good, Genevieve hissed. She stood up, dusting off her hands as if she had touched something filthy. And if you cry, if you utter one word of complaint, you remember the cellar? You remember the rats, William? William nodded, tears spilling silently over his cheeks. Get them out of my sight, Genevieve snapped, turning to the door. Clara, where is that incompetent girl? The door opened again, and a young woman hurried in. She couldn't have been more than 20. She wore the plain grey dress of a lower housemaid, her apron stained with soot, her hair escaping its cap in frizzy, copper-coloured tendrils. This was Clara Reed. Sebastian remembered the name from the payroll ledgers, a recent hire, daughter of a local blacksmith. I am here, my lady. I was heating the milk, Clara said, her voice steady but respectful. Take these things away. They smell of the stables. Scrub them until they are raw if you have to. I want them pristine for the Duke's arrival. Yes, my lady. Genevieve swept out of the room, leaving a scent of heavy rose perfume that seemed to choke the air. As soon as the door clicked shut, the atmosphere in the room shattered. Sebastian watched, his hand gripping the stone ledge of his hiding spot, so hard his knuckles turned white. He expected the maid to be rough. He expected her to drag them off. Instead, Clara dropped to her knees. She opened her arms, and the twins, who had stood like statues for the future Duchess, collapsed into the maid's embrace. They buried their faces in her soot-stained apron, sobbing openly. Shh, shh, my brave wolves, Clara whispered, rocking them back and forth. It's gone. The witch is gone. She said, the cellar, William choked out. Over my dead body, Clara said fiercely, pulling back to look him in the eye. She used her thumb to wipe away a smudge of dirt from his cheek. I won't let her take you there. I've hidden biscuits in the laundry chute. We'll have a feast tonight. Just us. Okay? She hates us, Charlotte whimpered. She doesn't matter, Clara said, her voice fiercely protective. Your father is coming. He's a good man, remember? You told me he used to carry you on his shoulders. He won't believe us, William said, looking defeated. She said father loves her more than us. Clara pulled them close again, her eyes flashing with a fire that illuminated her plain features, making her look, for a moment, more regal than the woman in silk who had just left. Then your father is a fool, Clara stated flatly, and if he doesn't believe you, I will pack your bags myself, and we will run away to the coast. I promise. Sebastian slumped against the cold stone wall of the passage. The rage in his chest was a physical pain, but beneath it was something else. Awe. He had come to catch a monster. He hadn't expected to find a guardian angel wearing a soot-stained apron. October 15th, 1889. Sebastian did not reveal himself that night. He couldn't. Not yet. If he stormed in now, Genevieve would weep, claim the children were lying, claim the maid was manipulating them. She was a Caldwell. Her family had lawyers who could twist the truth into knots. He needed irrefutable proof. He needed to see how deep the rot went. He spent the night in the dusty, unused winter study, a room locked from the outside, but accessible via the passages. He slept in a chair, wrapped in his rough coat, haunted by the image of his son's flinch. The next morning, Sebastian enacted the second phase of his plan. He shaved his distinctive mutton chop whiskers, leaving only a rough stubble. He applied a theatrical adhesive scar, a remnant of a university drama club, across his left cheek and pulled a flat cap low over his eyes. He exited the house through the servant tunnels and walked around to the stables, approaching the head groundskeeper, an old man named Silas who was half blind from cataracts. New man? Silas squinted at him. Sent from the agency in London, Sebastian grunted, adopting a rough Cockney accent. Name's Arthur. Here to fix the west wall." "About time," Silas spat. "Go on then. Keep your head down. Her ladyship is on a warpath today." Sebastian spent the morning hauling stones near the rose garden, a vantage point that gave him a clear view of the terrace. At noon, Genevieve held court. She was hosting tea for the local gentry, Lady Fitzroy and the vicar's wife. Sebastian worked slowly, listening. "And how are the dear children?" the vicar's wife asked, sipping her tea. "Oh, they are simply exhausted," Genevieve sighed, looking tragically beautiful. "I try to get them to study, to play, but they are so lethargic. I fear they inherited their mother's weak constitution." "You are a saint to take them on," Lady Fitzroy cooed. "I do what I must for Sebastian," Genevieve said bravely, "though between us they are difficult. Prone to lying, violent outbursts. I fear for my own safety sometimes." Sebastian smashed a stone into the mud with his trowel. Lies. Every word a poison. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the side door. Charlotte ran out, chasing a rolling hoop. She was laughing, a rare, genuine sound. She didn't see the tea table. The hoop rolled straight into the leg of the table, causing the teapot to wobble and spill a splash of hot tea onto the grass, missing everyone entirely. The conversation stopped. Charlotte froze. Her face went pale. I'm sorry, Mother." Genevieve stood up slowly. To the guests, she looked concerned. "Oh, my poor clumsy darling, are you hurt?" "No," Charlotte whispered. Genevieve turned to the guests with a tight smile. "Forgive us. A mother's work is never done. If you will excuse me, I must attend to her discipline. We cannot have wild behavior when the Duke arrives." She grabbed Charlotte's wrist. It looked gentle to the guests, but Sebastian, watching from 10 yards away, saw the way her fingernails dug into the child's soft skin. Charlotte gasped, but bit her lip. Genevieve dragged the girl into the house. Sebastian dropped his trowel. He vaulted the low garden wall, ignoring Silas shouting at him, and ran for the servants' entrance. He scrambled back into the walls, his heart hammering against his ribs. He navigated the darkness, moving toward the sound of the high-pitched screaming. It wasn't in the nursery. It was coming from the linen room. He reached the spy hole just as the door below flew open. Genevieve threw Charlotte onto a pile of laundry sheets. "You embarrassing little brat!" Genevieve screamed. The mask was gone entirely now. Her face was twisted in a snarl. She raised her hand to strike. "Don't touch her!" The voice was like a whip crack. Clara stood in the doorway. She was trembling, holding a heavy brass candlestick holder in her hand. Genevieve froze, her hand mid-air. She turned slowly to look at the maid. "Excuse me," I said. "Don't touch her," Clara said, stepping between the Duchess-to-be and the child. "You want to hit someone? Hit me. But if you lay a hand on Charlotte again, I will go to the village. I will tell the vicar. I will tell the baker. I will scream it to anyone who will listen." Genevieve laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Who would believe you? You are a nobody, a servant. I could have you thrown in prison for theft before the sun sets. I could say you stole my diamond brooch. In fact, I think I will." "Do it," Clara challenged, though Sebastian could see her knuckles were white around the candlestick. "But the Duke will know. He isn't stupid." "The Duke," Genevieve sneered, stepping closer, towering over the small maid, "is a man. And like all men, he sees what he wants to see. He wants a beautiful wife and a quiet home. He doesn't want 2 broken children and a hysterical maid. When he arrives, you will be gone. And these children, well, boarding school in Switzerland is lovely this time of year. They say the discipline there is rigorous." Charlotte began to sob loudly behind Clara. Clara didn't back down. She raised the candlestick higher. "Get out!" Genevieve stared at her, calculating. She smoothed her dress. "Enjoy your victory, you filth. You have until tomorrow morning to pack your bags. If you are on this estate when the sun rises, I will have the constable drag you away." Genevieve turned and stormed out. Clara dropped the candlestick. It clattered loudly on the floor. She turned and scooped Charlotte up, her bravado vanishing instantly, replaced by terror. I'm sorry. Clara wept into the girl's hair. "I shouldn't have. I made it worse." "She's going to send us away," Charlotte cried. "No," Clara said, her voice shaking. "We leave tonight. I know a cart driver going to Manchester. We'll go tonight." Inside the wall, Sebastian leaned his forehead against the cold brick. He was shaking, not with fear, but with a mixture of volcanic rage and overwhelming gratitude. He had seen enough. He retreated from the spy hole. He didn't go back to the garden. He went to the master suite. He stripped off the dirty groundskeeper clothes. He washed the dirt from his face and peeled off the fake scar. He dressed in his finest suit, black mourning wool, a crisp white shirt, his ducal signet ring. He walked down the main staircase, his boots heavy on the marble. He found Mr. Henderson, the aging butler, polishing silver in the dining room. Henderson looked up and dropped a spoon. "Your Grace, we didn't expect you until Thursday." "Plans changed, Henderson," Sebastian said. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a coming storm. "Where is Lady Genevieve?" "She is in the drawing room, Your Grace." "Shall I announce you?" "No," Sebastian said, his eyes dark. "I want to surprise her." "Very good, sir. And shall I fetch the children?" "No," Sebastian said. "Fetch the maid." "Clara Reed." Henderson looked confused. "The scullery maid, sir." "I believe she has been dismissed." Lady Genevieve gave orders. "Bring her to the library," Sebastian commanded. "Now." "And Henderson?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Treat her as you would a guest of this house. If anyone disrespects her, they answer to me." Henderson's eyes widened. "Immediately, Your Grace." Sebastian turned toward the library. The game of shadows was over. It was time for the Duke to return. The library, Harrogate Manor. Clara Reed felt like she was walking to the gallows. When Mr. Henderson had found her in the scullery, packing her meagre belongings into a tattered rucksack, she assumed the constable had arrived. Instead, she was being marched to the Duke's private library. The room was cavernous, smelling of leather, tobacco, and old paper. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows against the shelves. Standing by the window, with his back to her, was a man. He was tall, his shoulders broad, and set with a military stiffness. He didn't look like the portrait in the hallway. He looked harder, wearier. "Close the door, Henderson," the Duke said. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. "Yes, Your Grace." The latch clicked. Clara was alone with him. She squeezed her hands together to stop them from shaking. She was wearing her travel cloak over her uniform, ready to flee. "Lady Genevieve told me I am to leave, Your Grace," Clara said, her voice small but clear. "If this is about the brooch, I didn't take it. I swear on my mother's grave." The Duke turned slowly. Clara's breath hitched. He was handsome, devastatingly so, but his face was a mask of thunder. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto hers. He walked toward her, and instinct told her to step back, but her feet were rooted to the Persian rug. "I know you didn't take the brooch," Sebastian said softly. Clara blinked. You do?" "I know," he continued, taking another step closer. "Because Lady Genevieve has been wearing it all afternoon. It is pinned to her under bodice. She intends to find it in your apron pocket later tonight. Clara stared at him, stunned. How could you possibly know that? Sebastian stopped 3 feet from her. He looked at her not as a servant, but as an equal. Tell me, Clara, when you threatened to hit the future duchess with a candlestick holder, were you really going to strike her? Clara gasped. The blood drained from her face. I don't. Answer me. Yes, she whispered, lifting her chin defiantly. To stop her hurting Charlotte, yes, I would have struck her down. You can hang me for it if you like. To her shock, the Duke's grim expression shattered. He smiled. It wasn't a polite, aristocratic smile. It was a look of profound relief and gratitude. Hang you? Sebastian let out a rough laugh, running a hand through his dark hair. Miss Reed, I intend to give you a raise, a significant one. Clara was too confused to speak. I haven't been in London, Sebastian confessed, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I arrived yesterday. I have been inside the walls. I saw everything. I saw the biscuit feast. I saw you stand between a monster and my children when I was too cowardly to do it myself. You were watching. Clara felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. I had to be sure, he said, his face darkening again, and I have seen enough to make my blood boil. But I cannot act, not fully, until I have secured the children. And I cannot do that without you. He reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and rougher than a duke's should be. They trust you. They don't trust me. Not anymore. They think I sent her to torment them. I need you to help me fix this. Will you help me? Clara looked down at their joined hands, a scandal in itself, and then up into his desperate eyes. All fear vanished, replaced by a steely resolve. What do you need me to do? The nursery. 10 minutes later, the door to the nursery creaked open. William and Charlotte were huddled under the bed, clutching a bag of stale biscuits. When the footsteps approached, William squeezed his eyes shut. Go away, he shouted, his voice cracking. We aren't coming out. Not even for a story about the tiger of Bengal? The voice was deep, familiar, and achingly gentle. William's eyes snapped open. He scrambled out from under the dust ruffle. Standing in the center of the room was his father. But he wasn't the distant, mourning figure of 2 years ago. He was on one knee, his arms wide open. Behind him stood Clara, smiling through tears. Father, Charlotte whispered, peeking out. I'm here, Lottie. I'm here, Will. The dam broke. The twins launched themselves across the room. Sebastian caught them, the impact nearly knocking him backward. He buried his face in their necks, inhaling the scent of lavender soap and childhood. He wept. He didn't care that he was a peer of the realm. He wept openly, holding his children as if he had just pulled them from a burning building. I'm sorry, he choked out, kissing the top of William's head. I'm so sorry I left you with her. I didn't know. She said you hated us, William sobbed into his father's coat. She lied, Sebastian said fiercely, pulling back to look at them. I love you more than life itself, and she will never, ever hurt you again. Do you hear me? Never. Is she gone? Charlotte asked, wiping her nose. Sebastian's expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. Not yet. We have to play a game first. A very important game. Can you two be brave soldiers for me one last time? The twins looked at each other, then at Clara. Clara nodded encouragingly. We can, William said, puffing out his chest. Good. Sebastian stood up, smoothing his suit. Clara, get them washed and dressed in their finest clothes. Not the stiff ones she makes them wear. The comfortable velvet ones. Then bring them to the drawing room in exactly 1 hour. "And you, Your Grace?" Clara asked. Sebastian walked to the door, his hand resting on the brass handle. He looked back, and for a moment, the terrifying intensity in his eyes made the room feel colder. "I am going to have tea with my fiancée." The drawing room. Lady Genevieve Caldwell was in high spirits. The tea with the vicar's wife had been a success, despite the brat's clumsiness. She had managed to paint herself as the suffering martyr, a role she played to perfection. She was currently reclining on the chaise longue, examining her nails, when the double doors were thrown open. "Sebastian!" she gasped, springing to her feet. She hadn't expected him for days. She quickly scanned her reflection in the mirror, hair perfect, dress unwrinkled, and rushed toward him with practiced elegance. "My darling, you're home!" She threw her arms around his neck. Sebastian stood stiffly for a moment, before forcing himself to return the embrace. He felt sick, the scent of her rose perfume, which once seemed intoxicating, now smelled like rot. "Genevieve," he said, stepping back and kissing her hand. The carriage made good time. "I am so relieved," she cooed, touching his cheek. "It has been... Oh, Sebastian, it has been so difficult without you. The burden of this estate. The servants are unruly, and the children..." She let out a tragic sigh. "I have tried my best, but I fear I am failing them." Sebastian walked over to the drinks cabinet and poured himself a brandy to hide the shaking of his hands. "Is that so? Henderson tells me you've been quite active." "Henderson is a dinosaur," she dismissed. "He doesn't understand discipline. But never mind that. You're here. We must celebrate. I shall have the cook prepare a feast." "I've already ordered it," Sebastian said, turning around. "And I've asked the vicar and Lady Fitzroy to return for dinner. I want to make a formal announcement regarding our wedding date." Genevieve's eyes lit up. "Oh, Sebastian! Truly?" "Truly. Tonight will be a night everyone in Derbyshire remembers." Genevieve clapped her hands. "I must go and change. I have the most stunning crimson gown." "One thing," Sebastian interrupted, his voice deceptively casual. "Where are the children? I should like to see them." Genevieve froze for a fraction of a second. "Oh, darling, they are unwell. A fever, I think. I have confined them to their rooms for their own good. It wouldn't be wise to disturb them." "A fever?" Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "How sudden?" "Very sudden. And violent. They were delirious earlier, screaming, throwing things." She shook her head sadly. "It breaks my heart." "I see." Sebastian took a sip of brandy. "Well, best let them rest, then." Genevieve smiled, relieved. "You are so wise. I will go and dress." She hurried out of the room. Sebastian watched her go, his grip on the crystal glass tightening until it threatened to shatter. Violent, delirious. "Enjoy your crimson gown, Genevieve," he whispered to the empty room. "It will be the last thing you ever wear in this house." The dinner party. The dining room was ablaze with candlelight. The silver sparkled, the crystal gleamed, and the air was filled with the polite chatter of the local gentry. The vicar, Reverend Thomas, was soaring enthusiastically into a pheasant. Lady Fitzroy was complimenting Genevieve on her complexion. Genevieve sat at the foot of the table, radiating triumph. She wore the crimson gown, the diamond brooch she had lost earlier, now conspicuously absent. She was saving its discovery for later, and a necklace of rubies Sebastian had given her. Sebastian sat at the head, silent and watchful. "So, Your Grace," Lady Fitzroy chirped, "Genevieve tells us you have set a date?" "Indeed," Sebastian said, leaning back in his chair. "But before we get to that, I wanted to thank Genevieve publicly." The table fell silent. Genevieve beamed, lowering her lashes modestly. She has taken on a burden that few would accept, Sebastian continued, his voice smooth. Raising another woman's children, it requires patience, kindness, a gentle hand. Oh, it is nothing, Genevieve murmured. I love them as my own. Do you? Sebastian asked. The question hung in the air a moment too long. Genevieve laughed nervously. Of course. Though, as I told Lady Fitzroy, they can be challenging. Their temperaments... Yes, Sebastian interrupted. You mentioned they were violent, and currently suffering from a fever. High fever, Genevieve nodded firmly. Contagious, I fear. Sebastian signalled to Henderson, who was standing in the shadows. That is strange, because I visited the nursery an hour ago. Genevieve's smile faltered. You did? But I told you. I found no fever, Sebastian said, standing up. And I found no violence. Henderson. Henderson opened the double doors. The room went deadly quiet. Walking in hand with Clara, were William and Charlotte. They looked angelic. William wore a dark blue velvet suit, Charlotte a matching dress with a white ribbon in her hair. They were clean, calm, and healthy. There was not a spot of fever on them. "Father!" Charlotte cried out, breaking protocol. She ran to him. Sebastian caught her, lifting her onto his hip in front of the shocked guests. "Hello, darling." Genevieve stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is irresponsible. They are sick. They are delirious." "They look remarkably well to me," the vicar noted, adjusting his spectacles. "She's lying," William shouted, pointing a small finger at Genevieve. The guests gasped. "William!" Genevieve snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. "Go to your room this instant. You are hallucinating." "No," Sebastian said. His voice was no longer smooth. It was thunder. "He stays." He placed Charlotte gently on the ground and walked toward Genevieve. The guests shrank back. "You told me they were wild. You told me they were bruised from falling out of trees. You told me they loved you." Sebastian stopped at the side of the table. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a piece of paper, a letter. "I found this in the fireplace in the study," Sebastian said. "It's a letter William tried to send me 3 weeks ago. You burned it, but you didn't check if it turned to ash." He held up the charred scrap. It says, "She locks us in the dark. Please help." "He is a lying child," Genevieve shrieked, her mask slipping completely. "He writes fantasies, and that Maid." She pointed a shaking finger at Clara. "She put him up to it. She is a thief. She stole my diamond brooch." "Is this the brooch?" Sebastian reached into his own pocket and pulled out the glittering diamond pin. Genevieve went pale. Yes. Where did you find it?" "I took it off your dress in the cloakroom while you were bathing before dinner," Sebastian lied smoothly. "You were wearing it. You intended to plant it on Clara to have her arrested because she stopped you from beating my daughter." "Beating?" Lady Fitzroy gasped, dropping her fork. "I saw it," Sebastian roared, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "I was here, Genevieve. I was in the walls. I saw you drag Charlotte by her hair. I heard you threaten to put William in the cellar with the rats." The silence in the room was absolute. The vicar looked horrified. Lady Fitzroy looked as though she might faint. Genevieve looked around the room, realizing she was cornered. Her face twisted into a sneer of pure ugliness. "They are wretched brats," she spat, no longer pretending. "Spoiled, whiny, useless little things. I was trying to make them presentable. I was trying to mold them into something worthy of your title, you blind fool." "You are not worthy to speak their names," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Get out." "You can't do this," she hissed. "My father is the Earl of..." Your father will receive a full account of your conduct by morning, Sebastian cut her off. And if you are not off my land in 10 minutes, I will have you dragged off by the stable hands. He turned his back on her. Henderson, escort Lady Genevieve to her carriage. Throw her trunks out after her. With pleasure, Your Grace, Henderson said, a rare smile gracing his lips. Genevieve looked at the guests, but they turned their heads away. She looked at Sebastian's broad back. With a scream of frustration, she grabbed a wine glass and hurled it at the wall, shattering it before storming out of the room. The heavy doors slammed shut. Sebastian took a deep breath. He looked at the vicar. My apologies for the disruption, Reverend. I'm afraid the wedding is off. He walked over to Clara, who was standing protectively by the twins. He looked at her, really looked at her, in her plain grey dress, standing amidst the velvet and silk, shining brighter than any of them. Thank you, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. Clara curtsied, her cheeks pink. I only did what was right, Your Grace. No, Sebastian said, kneeling down to hug his children again. You did what a mother would do, and I will never forget it. November the 1st, 1889. The scandal of Lady Genevieve's expulsion did not stay within the stone walls of Harrogate Manor. It leaked out like ink in water, staining the gossip columns of every newspaper from Derbyshire to London. The Duke and the Domestic, one headline screamed. Madness at the Manor, read another. Inside the estate, however, a fragile peace had bloomed. Sebastian sat in his study, reviewing the ledgers, but his eyes kept drifting to the open door. Down the hall, he could hear laughter. It was a sound that had been absent from the house for 2 years. He stood and walked to the doorway. In the main hall, because it was raining, Clara had set up an indoor cricket pitch, using piles of books as wickets. William was batting with a fire poker, and Charlotte was bowling with a ball of yarn. Clara was cheering them on, her hair loose from its pins, looking less like a servant and more like family. Sebastian leaned against the doorframe, a strange ache in his chest. He had fired the previous nanny the morning after the dinner party. He had fired the governess the day after that. There was only one person the children would tolerate. You're bowling too slow, Lottie, William shouted. I am aiming for precision, Charlotte retorted, sounding exactly like her father. Clara looked up and caught Sebastian staring. She froze, smoothing her apron self-consciously. The laughter died down. The old hierarchy tried to reassert itself. Your Grace, she said, dipping a curtsy. I apologize. We were making a racket. No, Sebastian said, walking into the room. Don't stop. I actually came to ask if I might have a turn at bat. William's jaw dropped. You play cricket, father? I was the captain at Eton, Sebastian said, rolling up his crisp white sleeves. Though I am a bit rusty. For the next hour, the Duke of Harrogate, a peer of the realm, played yarn ball cricket in his hallway with a scullery maid and his children. He laughed until his sides hurt. He saw the colour returning to William's cheeks. He saw the fear leaving Charlotte's eyes. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Sebastian found Clara in the library. She was dusting the upper shelves, balancing precariously on a ladder. Clara, he said. She jumped, nearly losing her footing. Sebastian was there in an instant, his hands gripping her waist to steady her. For a moment, neither moved. The heat of his hands burned through the rough fabric of her dress. He looked up at her, his eyes dark and searching. Careful, he murmured. Thank you, Your Grace, she breathed, scrambling down. She stepped back, putting distance between them. The air was thick with things unsaid. I have papers for you to sign, Sebastian said, his voice rough. He walked to his desk. I am promoting you. You are no longer a scullery maid. You are the governess of Harrogate Manor. Your salary will be tripled. You will take the guest suite in the East Wing. Clara stared at him. Your Grace, I cannot. I have no education. I don't speak French. I cannot play the pianoforte. Society will eat you alive if you make a maid a governess. I don't care about society, Sebastian snapped, perhaps a little too forcefully. I care about my children. You are the only one they trust. You are the only one I trust. He softened, walking around the desk. Please, stay. Not as a servant who scrubs floors, but as a companion to them. Clara looked at the contract. It was freedom. It was safety. But it was also dangerous. She knew the way he looked at her. She knew the way she looked at him. People are talking, sir, she whispered. They say I seduced you. They say I plotted to get rid of Lady Genevieve. Let them talk, Sebastian said fiercely. Lions do not lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. But I am not a lion, Your Grace, Clara said sadly. I am a blacksmith's daughter. And if I stay, and if things change between us, I will be the one who is destroyed. Sebastian stepped closer, invading her space. I will not let anyone destroy you. He reached out, his fingers grazing her cheek. It was an improper touch, a scandalous touch. Clara leaned into it for a fraction of a second before pulling away. I will sign the papers, she said, her voice trembling, for William and Charlotte. Good, Sebastian said, though his eyes lingered on her lips. Good. December 20th, 1889. The invitation arrived on thick, cream-coloured cardstock, embossed with the gold seal of the Lord Lieutenant of Derbyshire, the Winter Solstice Ball. It was the most important social event of the season. To miss it was political suicide. To attend it, in the wake of the Genevieve scandal, was to walk into a firing squad. Sebastian tossed the invitation onto the breakfast table. We aren't going. Clara, who was cutting William's toast into soldiers, a habit he refused to outgrow, looked up. She wore a simple but high-quality blue wool dress now, her hair pinned up properly. She looked every inch the lady, though her hands were still rough from years of work. You must go, Clara said quietly. If you hide, you validate their rumors. You must show them you are unashamed. I cannot go alone, Sebastian grumbled, and I will not take some vapid debutante simply to appease the gossips. Take Clara, Charlotte chirped, her mouth full of eggs. Sebastian and Clara froze. Don't be silly, Lottie, Clara said quickly. Governesses do not attend balls. Why not? William asked. You look prettier than Lady Genevieve ever did, and you don't smell like old flowers. Sebastian looked at Clara. The idea took root in his mind. It was madness. It was social anarchy. It was perfect. The children are right, Sebastian said slowly. Your Grace, absolutely not, Clara panicked. I don't know the dances. I don't have a dress. They will laugh at me. They will laugh at you. I can teach you the dances, Sebastian said, standing up. And the dress. Leave that to me. The night of the ball. The carriage ride to the assembly rooms was silent. Clara sat stiffly, terrified that if she moved, the silk of her gown would shatter. Sebastian had outdone himself. He had commissioned a dress from a modiste in Manchester who didn't ask questions. It was a midnight blue velvet, dark almost to the point of black, trimmed with silver lace. It was modest, covering her shoulders and arms, but the cut was exquisite, highlighting her slender waist and the graceful curve of her neck. She wore no jewels. That would be presumptuous, but Sebastian had woven silver ribbons into her copper hair. Breathe, Sebastian said, taking her gloved hand in the darkness of the carriage. I feel like an imposter, Clara whispered. I feel like Cinderella, waiting for the clock to strike. You are no imposter, Sebastian said firmly. "You have more nobility in your little finger than that entire room combined." The carriage stopped. The footman opened the door. Sebastian stepped out, the flashbulbs of early cameras popping. He turned and offered his hand. Clara took it. As she stepped onto the red carpet, a hush fell over the crowd. They expected a recluse. They expected a broken man. Instead, they saw the Duke of Harrogate, looking fierce and proud, with a stunning, unknown woman on his arm. They entered the ballroom. The music, a waltz, faltered for a beat before continuing. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. Fans snapped open to hide whispered gossips. "Who is she? Is that the maid? She looks surprisingly elegant." Sebastian ignored them all. He led Clara straight to the dance floor. "I can't," she hissed. "Everyone is watching." "Look at me," Sebastian commanded, placing his hand on her waist. "Only me. The rest of them are furniture." He swept her into the waltz. Clara stumbled on the first step, but Sebastian held her firm, guiding her with a strength that made her feel weightless. After a moment, muscle memory from their practice sessions took over. They moved together fluidly, a swirl of black and midnight blue. For a moment, the world fell away. There was only the heat of his hand, the smell of his sandalwood cologne, and the intensity of his gaze. "You are doing perfectly," he whispered. "I am terrified," she admitted, smiling weakly. "I won't let you fall." As the music ended, the room erupted in polite, confused applause. Sebastian didn't let go of her hand. He led her toward the refreshment table. That was when the crowd parted. Standing near the punch bowl, wearing a dress of violent crimson, was Lady Genevieve. Beside her stood a tall, imposing man with grey whiskers, Lord Caldwell, her father. And beside him stood a man in a rough, cheap suit who looked out of place among the gentry. Sebastian stiffened. "Stay behind me." Genevieve stepped forward, her eyes venomous. "Well, well. The Duke and his creature. You have certainly lowered your standards. Sebastian." "Careful, Genevieve," Sebastian warned, his voice low. "I have nothing to be careful of," she sneered. She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, you wonder who this woman is. You wonder why the Duke broke his engagement to an earl's daughter?" The room went deadly silent. "He claims she is a governess," Genevieve shouted. "But I have brought someone who knows the truth, someone from her past." She shoved the man in the cheap suit forward. He looked nervous, clutching a flat cap. "Tell them," Genevieve commanded. The man looked at Clara, then at the floor. "That's her," he mumbled. "Clara Reed." "And who are you?" Sebastian demanded. "I'm the owner of the Black Horse Tavern in Leeds," the man said. "She worked for me 3 years ago." Clara frowned. "I have never been to Leeds." "Liar!" Genevieve screamed. "Tell them what she did." The man swallowed hard. She stole £50 from the till, and she was entertaining gentlemen in the rooms upstairs. She's a thief and a whore." Gasps rang out through the ballroom. Ladies clutched their pearls. Men looked at Clara with renewed, sordid interest. Clara felt the blood drain from her body. "That isn't true," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was in the village. I was caring for my dying mother. I have never—" "Silence!" Lord Caldwell boomed. He turned to Sebastian. "Your Grace, you have brought a common criminal and a woman of loose morals into polite society. You have insulted my daughter and my house. I demand you eject her immediately, or I will call the constable." Sebastian looked at the man from Leeds. He looked at Genevieve's triumphant smirk. Then he looked at Clara. She was trembling, tears brimming in her eyes, waiting for him to pull away. waiting for him to realize she was a liability. Sebastian slowly unbuttoned his white gloves. He took them off, finger by finger. "You say she worked in Leeds 3 years ago?" Sebastian asked the man. "Aye," the man said, sweating. "August 1886. I remember it clear as day." Sebastian smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "That is fascinating," the Duke said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "Because in August 1886, Clara Reed was 17 years old, and she was listed in the parish records of Harrogate Village as receiving the sacrament for the sick on behalf of her mother every single Sunday." He turned to the crowd. "And furthermore, I have the employment records of this man." He pointed at the accuser. "He isn't a tavern owner from Leeds. He is a stable hand dismissed from the Caldwell estate 6 months ago for drunkenness." The crowd murmured. Genevieve's eyes widened. How do you know that?" she stammered. "Because, my dear Genevieve," Sebastian said, stepping closer to her, "I am a duke. I have resources you cannot imagine, and I anticipated you would try something like this." He turned to Lord Caldwell. "Your daughter just paid a man to bear false witness to destroy the reputation of an innocent woman. That is a crime, my lord. Slander. Defamation." Sebastian wrapped his arm around Clara's waist, pulling her flush against him. "And let me make one thing clear to everyone in this room," Sebastian declared, his voice ringing like iron. "This woman is not just a governess. She is the savior of my children. She is the moral compass of my home. And anyone who insults her insults the House of Stirling, and I do not forgive insults." He looked at Lord Caldwell. "Take your daughter and leave, before I forget that I am a gentleman." Lord Caldwell, purple with rage and embarrassment, grabbed Genevieve's arm. "You fool!" he hissed at her. "Come!" They retreated, the crowd parting for them like the Red Sea, but this time in judgment, not respect. Sebastian turned to Clara. She was crying, but they were tears of relief. "Take me home," she whispered. "Immediately," Sebastian said. But as they turned to leave, the orchestra struck up a new song. Sebastian paused. He looked at Clara, then at the staring crowd. "Actually," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye, "I believe I promised you one more dance, and we are not leaving with our tails between our legs." He swept her back onto the floor, and this time, when they danced, the crowd didn't whisper. They watched in awe, because it was clear to everyone, from the lowliest waiter to the Lord Lieutenant, that the Duke was not dancing with a servant. He was dancing with the woman he loved. December 24th, 1889. Christmas Eve. The scandal of the winter ball had silenced the county. Lady Genevieve had fled to France in disgrace, her reputation in tatters. But silence, Sebastian learned, often precedes the loudest storms. It was Christmas Eve. The manor was quiet, blanketed in a heavy snowfall. The children were asleep, their stockings hung by the chimney. Sebastian sat in the library, a small velvet box in his hand, staring at the fire. He knew what he wanted to do. He also knew that asking a former scullery maid to be a duchess was an act of madness that could strip him of his social standing. He didn't care. Suddenly, the heavy silence was shattered by the frantic ringing of the estate bell. "Fire! Fire in the East Wing!" Sebastian's heart stopped. The East Wing. The nursery. He didn't think. He ran. He took the stairs 3 at a time, the smell of smoke, already thick and acrid in the air. The old timber of the manor was dry. The flames were spreading with terrifying speed. "William! Charlotte!" he roared, kicking open the nursery door. The room was filled with black smoke. The curtains were ablaze. "Father!" He found them huddled near the window. He grabbed them, covering their faces with his sleeping robe. Where is Clara? She went back, William screamed, coughing. She went back. For the locket. Sebastian's blood ran cold. The locket. It contained the only miniature portrait of the children's late mother, Lydia. Clara had gone back into the inferno to save the memory of the woman she replaced. Get them out, Henderson. Sebastian shoved the children into the arms of the butler who had just arrived. Your Grace, you cannot go back in. The roof is groaning. That is my wife in there, Sebastian shouted, the truth slipping out before the proposal. He plunged back into the smoke. The heat was unbearable. He crawled on the floor, calling her name until his throat was raw. Sebastian! He found her in the hallway, trapped behind a fallen beam. She was clutching the silver locket, her face smeared with soot, her dress singed. I have it, she choked out, holding up the locket. I couldn't let them lose her. You foolish, wonderful woman, Sebastian groaned. He didn't try to lift the beam. It was too heavy. Instead, he smashed the nearby window with a chair. The freezing air rushed in, feeding the fire but offering an escape. We have to jump, he said. It was a 10-foot drop into a snowdrift. I trust you, she whispered. He wrapped his arms around her, shielding her body with his own, and they fell out of the burning house just as the nursery ceiling collapsed with a thunderous crash. Christmas morning. The sun rose over a blackened, smoking ruin of the east wing, but the main house stood strong. They were gathered in the drawing room, the only warm room left. The children were shaken but safe, drinking hot cocoa. Clara sat in an armchair, her arm bandaged, her beautiful hair singed at the ends. She looked at the locket on the table. I'm sorry I couldn't save more. Sebastian looked at her. He looked at the soot on her face, the bandage on her arm, and the fierce love in her eyes as she checked on the twins for the 100th time. He walked over to the twins. William, Charlotte, come here. They stood before him. Do you remember when I told you I would never let anyone hurt you again? Yes, Father, William said. And do you remember when I asked you to be brave soldiers? Yes. I need you to be brave one last time, Sebastian said. He turned to Clara. He dropped to both knees, a posture of total submission no duke had ever performed for a servant. Clara Reed, he said, his voice cracked. You saved my children from cruelty. You saved their mother's memory from the fire. You saved me from a life of cold duty. Clara put a hand to her mouth. Sebastian, don't. You are a duke. I am nothing. You are everything, he corrected. You are the fire that warmed this cold house. I don't want a duchess who knows which fork to use. I want the woman who hides biscuits in the laundry chute. I want the woman who runs into flames for children who aren't her own. He opened the small velvet box. Inside sat a ring. Not a diamond, but a deep, burning ruby, surrounded by small diamonds. The sterling family ring. Marry me, he pleaded. Let them talk. Let the newspapers print their lies. I will burn every paper in London if I have to. Just say you will stay. Clara looked at the ring, then at the children. William stepped forward. Please, Miss Clara. Charlotte grabbed her good hand. Please be our mother. Tears cut tracks through the soot on Clara's face. She looked at the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had defended her when she was defenseless. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Sebastian let out a breath he felt he had been holding for years. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He kissed her, right there in front of the servants, the children, and the blackened windows. It tasted of smoke and ash. But to Sebastian, it was the sweetest thing he had ever known. The legacy. They were married 3 days later in the village chapel. Only the staff and the children attended. Genevieve Caldwell died a spinster in Paris, bitter and alone, having spent her fortune on lawsuits that never restored her reputation. Sebastian and Clara Sterling had 3 more children. The history books record Sebastian as a reformer who improved the rights of servants and labourers across Derbyshire. But the locals knew the truth. They knew that the Duke didn't change the laws because of politics. He changed them because he had married a maid who taught him that nobility isn't found in bloodlines, but in the heart. And every year, on Christmas Eve, the Duke would dismiss the servants early, and the family would sit on the floor of the drawing room, eating biscuits and telling the story of the ghost in the wall and the angel in the apron. And that is the incredible story of the Duke of Harrogate and Clara Reed. In a world obsessed with status and appearance, they proved that the only title that truly matters is the one written on the heart. It's a reminder that true love isn't about finding someone who fits a mold, but finding someone who sees you when you are invisible. What do you think? Was Sebastian right to humiliate Genevieve publicly, or did she deserve a second chance? And would you have had the courage to run back into that fire like Clara? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please take a second to hit that like button. It helps the channel so much. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a chaotic, romantic, and twisted story like this one. Share this with a friend who needs a little belief in true love today. Until next time.